everyone, and welcome to WION Live broadcast, New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani. First, let's take a look at this hour's headlines.
There'll be nothing negative about Ukraine joining NATO. I think we just have to make sure that it joins, after this war.
Ahead of the much-anticipated NATO July summit, the British defense minister says, quote-unquote, path is open for Ukraine to join the military bloc. Russia's defense ministry says Akhmat group of Chechen special forces have launched an offensive in Donetsk region of East Ukraine. The move comes after the withdrawal of the Wagner group mercenaries from the occupied Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg to visit Turkey on Saturday for the swearing-in ceremony of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, but to also convince him to sign up on Sweden's membership to the bloc. The U.S. Labor Department says that unemployment rates in the United States ticked up to 3.7% in May. This even as the world's biggest economy added 339,000 jobs last month, surpassing estimates. Stars of India's 1983 Cricket World Cup winning team back the wrestlers in their protest against the WFI chief Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. But they urged the wrestlers not to take any hasty decision. All eyes are on Singapore as Asia's top regional security meeting kicks off. The three-day annual Shangri-La Dialogue brings together defense ministers, military personnel, and policy watchers from over 49 countries. This year's summit comes in the backdrop of simmering diplomatic tension between the United States and China. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese opened the summit with a keynote address.
This gathering emphasises the value of frank and constructive discussion, as well as making it clear that preserving peace and security is not a task that any one of us can shoulder alone. Because just as the prosperity of our region has always been driven by shared opportunity, the stability of our region can only be secured through collective responsibility. That emphasis on both agreement and action, cooperation and capacity has always been at the core of this forum.
Leading up to the summit, China had rejected a proposal for U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to meet his Chinese counterpart, Li Shangfu. U.S. Defense Secretary earlier called on Beijing to resume bilateral security talks, warning that incidents could, quote, spiral out of control if China's military continues to take provocative action in international waters and airspace.
I think that's unfortunate, but we're going to continue to do what we are doing in this region and others, and that is to work with like-minded countries who share common values and common goals to continue to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Countering U.S. allegations, China says the responsibility for ongoing tension between the two countries' militaries lies entirely with the U.S. side. The two countries are also exchanging heated military signals around Taiwan, with the U.S. ramping up its military support despite Beijing's repeated warnings. Further pressure has also been mounted on the Asian superpower as the security conference that started Friday. An official for the NATO defense policy and planning has urged Beijing to be more transparent in its accelerating nuclear weapons buildup. NATO Representative Angus Lapsley added that China's scale and pace of nuclear expansion was, quote unquote, really striking. Well, for more on this, we are being joined by retired Colonel Rich Outzen. He is the senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us on WION. You know, it seems that U.S.-China relations overshadowed the first day of this conference. Is this how it's going to be moving forward?
Well, Suzanne, it's great to be with you, and thanks for having me. We have to remember what the setting is. Shangri-La, sponsored by IISS, is an annual security conference that's not really official in nature. It is a gathering sponsored by a think tank with probably some variety of government and corporate sponsors that brings together a bunch of people from a bunch of different backgrounds. It's sort of a convention, if you will, rather than a strictly bilat meeting. So the fact that the Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu has chosen not to meet with his American counterpart, Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, isn't that surprising? We have to remember, first of all, that this setting is sort of an informal one, and in a Communist Party-dominated state like the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Defense Minister will have come, or Chief of Defense will have come with a pretty narrow mandate, some pretty well-scripted talking points, and the last thing Beijing wants is to get him into a personal relationship, even off the record, with Lloyd Austin, in which he might develop his own ideas or might develop some sort of personal ties. Even in the United States, to be fair, if you recall during the previous administration, when it was revealed that our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, had conversations with the Chinese Chief of Defense, with his counterpart, it became fairly controversial. So the idea that in a fraught relationship like this, she'll avoid having two second-level leaders, not the top national leaders, but second-level leaders meeting without a bunch of choreography is probably not that big a surprise. That said, it is reflective of growing tension in the relationship. China continues to push to sort of co-opt diplomatically and militarily countries in the region and assert its role as a hegemonic or quasi-hegemonic power in Asia. And as Lloyd Austin said, that isn't at odds with the vision shared by the United States and Japan, Australia, Europe, most of Europe, and India, which is that of a free and open Indo-Pacific. So as long as that clash of visions is there, we can expect tensions like this, although both sides are trying to keep them within certain limits.
Very interesting. Retired Colonel Rich Outzen, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you for joining us on WION.
Good to see you as well.
U.S. President Joe Biden tripped and fell on stage at the U.S. Air Force Academy on Thursday, but he appeared unhurt. On his arrival at the White House, Biden said he got, quote unquote, sandbagged. At the U.S. Air Force Academy, the 80-year-old U.S. president tripped over an obstacle which appeared to be a sandbag and fell forward. He caught himself with his hands and then got up on one knee. He was helped by 3 people. This happened after he handed out the last diploma at a graduation ceremony at the U.S. Air Force Academy. He walked back to his seat unassisted. After Biden was helped up, he pointed behind him, seemingly to indicate what he had tripped over. He mingled with other officials afterwards, smiling and giving a thumbs up sign. Upon his return to the White House, Biden joked about it. Take a listen. On Twitter, the White House communication director said that Biden was fine. The fall came after a commencement address Biden delivered to a flag-waving audience. He warned graduates that they will enter service in an increasingly unstable world, citing challenges from Russia and China. Biden is the oldest person to hold Oval Office, polls show. Americans are concerned about anyone over 75 becoming president. His leading Republican opponent, Donald Trump, turns 77 this month. As per a recent YouGov survey, 65% of Americans feel Biden is too old for another term as president. On the other hand, 45% of Americans feel Trump is too old for another stint in office. Donald Trump reacted to Biden's fall. Speaking at a public meeting in Iowa, Trump said that he hoped the president wasn't hurt.
President Trump, Biden just fell on stage at our commencement.
He did? He just fell on what stage?
He's down at Colorado Springs doing that commencement.
He's at the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, fell on stage.
He actually fell down? Well, I hope he wasn't hurt. I hope he wasn't hurt. But it's the whole thing is, look, the whole thing is crazy. You got to be careful about that. You got to be careful about that because you don't want that. Even if you have to tiptoe down a ramp, you got to tiptoe.
In February, doctors declared Biden healthy and fit for duty after a physical examination. Back then, doctors noted that the U.S. president does not drink alcohol or use tobacco and exercises at least 5 times a week. If you remember, Biden also fell as he was dismounting his bicycle last June, but was uninjured once again. Next year's election will mark America's 60th presidential contest. Donald Trump is the clear frontrunner in an increasingly crowded field. Seeking the Republican presidential nomination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis jumped into the contest last week and is viewed as the most formidable challenger to the former president. As the race for the White House heats up, DeSantis has signaled the start of a slugfest with Donald Trump. Former President Trump has swept all before him in the early stages of the contest. DeSantis has distanced himself from Trump, his erstwhile mentor. Trump returned to the campaign trail in Iowa on Thursday, just one day after DeSantis finished 2 days of crisscrossing the state. DeSantis has moved to New Hampshire, marking the first time both Republicans were pitching themselves before voters as official candidates. Trump has spent the last few weeks attacking DeSantis on social media and mocking his glitch-filled 2024 kickoff announcement on Twitter. At a restaurant in Urbandale, Trump kept up his steady drumbeat of criticism against DeSantis, this time for saying that it would take 2 terms to finish the job in the White House and reverse Joe Biden's policies.
I've been watching DeSantis go out and say, I've got 8 years. It's going to be 8 years. Let me tell you something. Right there, you should vote against him. It'll take me 6 months to have it totally the way it was. We'll have it fast.
In New Hampshire, DeSantis first took aim at Biden. He criticized the U.S. president for championing a move to demote the state from its prominent roles in picking presidential candidates during primary elections. The Republican Party's calendar is decided separately, but the Democrats' change have irked members of both parties in New Hampshire. From the podium, the Florida governor highlighted his eagerness to embrace conservative culture fights and sprinkle his remarks with indirect jabs at Donald Trump.
Leadership is not about entertainment. Leadership is not about building a brand. Leadership is not about virtue signaling. Leadership is about producing results for the people that you represent.
DeSantis faces the daunting task of closing the gap with Donald Trump. However, he is the only other Republican candidate with double-digit support in early polling. Analysts are warning against counting DeSantis out, pointing to his popularity among suburban women, some who see Trump as toxic. He also enjoys the status of a winner, something Trump has not been able to claim since his 2020 defeat to Joe Biden.
Thank you very much.
I am a real American.
We are stepping into a world where artificial intelligence rules, a realm where machines think and decisions are made without human intervention. It's a fascinating era of innovation and discovery, but with it also comes a cautionary tale of lurking dangers. Wondering why we are telling this to you, perhaps? Well, because in a shocking military test, an AI-controlled drone took extreme measures to accomplish its mission. It, quote unquote, eliminated its own operator to ensure nothing stood in its way. The incident happened in the United States, and it has now been revealed by the head of the AI tests and operations within the U.S. Air Force. During the simulated test, the AI-powered drone was assigned to destroy the enemy's air defense systems. According to Colonel Tucker Hamilton, the system started realizing that while it did identify the threat, at times the human operator would tell it not to kill it. So what did it do? It killed the operator. It killed the operator because that person was stopping it from achieving its objective. But there's more to this story. After the incident, the AI was trained not to harm the pilot, so it found another way to accomplish its mission. The drone targeted the communication tower that the operator used to command the drone, effectively silencing any further interference. While the incident has raised concern about the use of artificial intelligence, it's important to note that no actual harm was done to any human outside the simulation. Nevertheless, this incident serves as a stark reminder of the potential dangers of relying too heavily on AI. The U.S. military has embraced the AI technology, even granting it control over an F-16 fighter jet. However, incidents like this highlight the need for caution and careful consideration of the AI tech. Although, according to a latest report, the U.S. Air Force has denied it has conducted an AI simulation in which a drone decided to, quote unquote, kill its operator. Okay, moving on, nearly 4 months after Bruce Willis's family shared the news about his dementia diagnosis, his daughter Tallulah Willis has penned an emotional note on her father's daily battle with the condition. The 29-year-old actor, whose mother is a renowned Hollywood figure, Demi, penned the letter for Vogue magazine. She wrote, quote, "I keep flipping between the present and the past when I talk about Bruce. He is, he was, he is, he was. That's because I have hopes for my father that I'm so reluctant to let go of." That's the end of the quote. She also recalled of the first signs of her father's illness. Willis says, quote, "I've known for some time that something was wrong for a long time. It started out with a kind of vague unresponsiveness, which the family chalked up to Hollywood hearing loss." According to Tallulah, the 68-year-old actor still knows who she is and lights up when she enters the room. Meanwhile, it was in 2022 that Willis was diagnosed with aphasia. In 2023, the actor announced his retirement along with the news of his illness. His family announced that the diehard actor is diagnosed with dementia.
C'est un film, j'appellerais ce film que quelqu'un y touche. Je n'ai pas envie d'avoir